So you might well have seen on the kind of sign up for this that I'm a former assistant principal. So my responsibility was teaching and learning and induction lead at an academy, secondary academy down on the South Coast in Southampton. I also worked across Oasis Community Learning as a lead practitioner for pedagogy in primary and secondary phases and early years. And up until Easter, I was in school teaching science and doing those things, and have done for the last 15 years. So this afternoon session, I'll talk you through the agenda in just a mo, but I'll give you a quick introduction about the National Institute of Teaching, and then I'll let you know the sorts of things that we'll cover today. What would be really, really helpful whilst I'm doing that would be, if you don't mind, and again, this is totally optional, to pop into the chat just what your role is. And if you're happy to say what organisation you're from, then that would be great too. The purpose of that is so that I can try and tailor the session as much as possible to the audience who's here, although there's quite a large group, so we might have to kind of limit the personalisation today. So the National Institute of Teaching is run by the School-Led Development Trust, who you may well have heard of. It's an organisation set up by 4 school trusts: the Harris Federation, Star Academies, Oasis Community Learning and Outward Grange Academies Trust. So between them, they're responsible for 188 primary, secondary and post-16 schools and colleges, and educate over 100,000 children across all sorts of communities. And we have campuses in Bristol, Birmingham, Doncaster, Redcar, London and Blackburn. So just a little bit of geographical information there for you. So the 4 founding trusts are joined by a network of associate colleges across the country with track records in teacher development, as well as playing a key role in the delivery of our programmes. They've also contributed to the design, and we draw on their local expertise and knowledge so that we can ensure that our programmes reflect their local contexts and the needs of all of the communities that we serve. So we're looking nationally at very kind of local contexts. That kind of partnership approach hopefully allows us to extend our reach across the country and deliver that targeted professional development where it's needed most. So that's sort of where we are. So our vision is this on the screen. We're a school-led organisation, so we have colleagues in schools throughout the organisation. We're led by those 4 founding multi-academy trusts and influenced by the associate colleges. And as I say, because we've got lots of colleagues who are serving in schools, it means that we find that we can be truly school-led, and hopefully what it will allow us to do is to deliver the programmes that respond to the real challenges in the sector, because we're working with people who are really there doing it on the ground. Alongside that, we carry out research and use that to influence not just our own programmes, but for feeding into the sector. We're making our materials as we go open, and our research open to anyone that would like to use it, so that it can be used as best possible to actually improve the teaching profession, and most importantly, obviously, the education the children receive. Our programmes are designed by teachers and leaders who understand those joys and also the pressures of school life. So we work in collaboration, and our exemplification comes from the schools that we work with. So thank you so much for those of you who've been typing into the chat. I'm not by any means ignoring that. I'm reading them as they come through, and it's really helpful for me to get a bit of context about who's here, and I will do my best to tailor as much as possible, though we have quite a large group. So our agenda today, the idea of what we're going to cover today will be, first of all, looking a little bit at the challenges the ECF has presented, but conversely, then the opportunities that we get from the ECF. We will, of course, talk about how the National Institutes programme can help with that. And I'll give you an overview of the programme and then an overview of the support that we can offer for schools. If at any point you need to leave, please don't be concerned about doing so. We will record the session, and afterwards one of my lovely colleagues will send it out to you so that you can watch back anything you might miss. So, looking at the chat, I can see we've got lots of people who are going to have a lot of experience and knowledge of the ECF, and some who will have slightly less. I'll give a little bit of background on the ECF. Please don't think that I'm trying to teach anyone to suck eggs. I'll keep it light, and hopefully it will still be interesting, even if you're coming at it from a real expert perspective. So I'm sure many of you will be aware that there's been a lot in the news and the press recently about the ECF. Stuff about its perception and its impact so far from all sorts of different perspectives, and it doesn't necessarily paint the most positive picture. So, for example, the DFE recently did an independent evaluation, which was followed by the Ofsted independent review of professional development and a teacher tap survey of the findings from their questionnaires over a period of time. And each of these has some really interesting findings, ones which we can't as a profession ignore. They were large samples of teachers sharing what they feel and experience as part of the ECF, and the views were sought from ECTs, mentors and school leaders across a massive range of schools. I'm sure you've come across some or all of this, but I'll share a little summary in just a moment of what those findings look like. They've also, a lot of this, been published in some very highly respected publications. So with both the TES and Schools Week sharing findings from those initial reports, it's really difficult to ignore the fact that though we may know there are many positives that can come from the ECF, there are also some challenges to overcome. Now, what we must remember, and I'll sort of caveat this, is that the ECF was put into place to start to look at some of the broader issues with recruitment and retention of teachers, which I'm sure many of you, I can see, are school-based, may well be experiencing. More so in certain areas and certain types of schools, in certain subjects and phases, but this is well researched and evidence in its conception. The research that went into the DFE's recruitment and retention strategy is what basically brought the ECF to exist. We also need to remember that it's very much in its infancy. We're only 2 years in. Some of you may have been part of the pilots before that, but when it was initially put into place, many of us, myself included, didn't have a full understanding of the implications on practice or indeed the rationale that was behind it. I would certainly say that though the ECF does present difficulties, it's vastly more consistent and offers the potential for far more support for our early career teachers than its predecessor, which was obviously the NQ2 induction, where a lot depended on your location, the local expertise, the preferences of individual schools. And the ECF came into place to try and combat large proportions of teachers leaving during their early careers. And whilst recruitment is at most difficult in some areas now, that's even more important. So what were the early careers teachers saying? There were these main themes that I've sort of pulled out that stood out most to me, I suppose, and you may well have some other things that you are very welcome to contribute, and feel free to type into the chat as we go. But ECTs were struggling to find the time they needed, and the commitment required is still considered an issue according to their responses, particularly those when we're talking about the self-directed study part of the curriculum for early careers. In terms of repetition, what I'm talking about there is that what ECTs have recognised is that a lot of the content seems repeated from their initial teacher education, their ITE. And that's intentional. Those of you who've had any insight into the core content framework and have looked into that, it's supposed to be repeated, but it's supposed to be repeated at a different level and from a different lens. And so us making sure that they're really clear on that is really important. Some ECTs found that the material didn't feel relevant to their context. They felt that it was difficult to adapt and to apply in the school or in the classroom or in the type of phase or subject that they're in. to actually apply it to that using the materials that they had in front of them. They also found that the workload, the structure and the planning and the organisation that went into their ECF didn't really align with what they were also doing in school at the same time. So the workload was a lot, but also when their workload in teaching was quite high anyway, they were struggling to manage what they also needed to do for the ECF. And I think sometimes it's really important also to look at what mentors are saying. Without them, the ECF just wouldn't exist. And we know that I certainly think back now to the mentors I've had for various things over the years. And without them, I would not be the teacher that I am now. And without them, maybe I wouldn't have made it through my early careers years. So the lowest ratings for mentors were for the tailoring of their training to their school context and their individual needs as mentors. Lots of them rated that quite poorly. They also found that the workload, particularly those who had dual roles or split responsibilities, and lots of them will be in kind of positions of authority within their schools, they found that really difficult to manage. They also really valued their time with their ECT, as did the ECTs. They thought that was the most important part of their course by a long way, both sides of this argument. And they felt like they didn't have that time to do that. And then I think probably the bit that strikes me is the fact that 18% of mentors felt they would be unlikely to mentor again. And that was largely down to that perceived high workload, the feeling they had limited time to participate or face time constraints in general to work with their early careers teacher or teachers in some cases. So it doesn't paint the most positive picture. So I'm going to move away from the concerns and the challenges a little bit and try and start to frame it a little bit more positively. And we can look at the opportunities and how we in schools or across groups of schools, as lots of you are, can start to kind of plan and prepare to give the ECF a better kind of rep, but also to make it easier on the ground to manage. So I'll just give you a second while you stop having to listen to me talking to read this quote. So this quote from Sam Twizzleton came from the recruitment and retention strategy that came into place in 2019. She consulted on the strategy, and her quote here, I think, frames the intention and the rationale behind it. And what we need to do in schools, I think, is to ensure that this is the reality so that we can really help to retain and then to recruit into what I think is a fantastic profession. It's no surprise that such a huge change would have some bumps along the way, the change from NQT to ECF, but there is some real potential here. So here are some of the opportunities that I see, and we need to consider how we frame these in schools. So first of all, we've got a 2-year programme here that intentionally revisits learning from initial teacher education to embed it in practice. Any of you who've done MPQs over the years or gone on to do further study will know that a lot of the evidence, the core evidence, is referenced time and time and time again, but you look at it from a different frame. So you'll all have heard of Rosenshine's principles. They're still relevant if you are a trust leader. They are still relevant when you're a teacher in your 2nd year, 5th year, 15th year. And so talking about that and knowing the theory behind building routines in your classroom for it and some strategies to do so, which you might learn in your initial teacher education, going into an ECT year gives the opportunity to hone and refine that knowledge and that basic understanding of strategy so that if you're a teacher in your first early careers year, you can really own your class. You've got some mental models of how it works, and you can start to establish them early on in a very different way to if you're in a classroom where you've got the other teacher supporting you, or perhaps you've just been thrown in there at the deep end on your training program and you just don't know these students or these pupils yet. And it means you can build on that mental model and put it into practice and adapt based on what you've learned already. So framing that with early careers teachers, I think, is really, really important, no matter what programme they're following and which delivery partner you're using. That could really, really help. Secondly, putting that practice into context. Each piece of that core content that you learnt during your initial teacher education can now be planned and prepared so that you can use it with a deeper knowledge of that context. Some early careers teachers will be in a different school now to where they did their training. Some of them might have moved up to a different year group or from one phase to another, or might be teaching across more than one subject or whatever it might be. So having some understanding of the what to do's and the what not to do's, and still having a reduced timetable for those 2 years, gives that great opportunity to do that and to try things out and to put that practice into context, whilst they're spending a little less time teaching than they might do otherwise. All of that with that ongoing support from a dedicated mentor that is there just for you. 90% of ECTs, in fact, more than 90% of ECTs valued their mentor highest of all. They remember their mentor for life, I certainly do, and they have a huge influence. And that school-based mentoring and coaching has the potential to impact substantially on teachers' professional understanding and practice, also their job satisfaction and retention. So in schools, what we need to do is make sure that that mentor is always available at the times that they should be in order to do that. And there's lots of research around how mentors can really have that important kind of impact. Obviously, the great thing about having this 2-year programme where we're all working with lead providers and delivery partners means that they still get that support from an ECF provider, pushing that continuous development onwards. And we know as teachers, the further on you get through your career, you realise how extremely important it is that professionally developing all of the time is really important. As evidence changes, what works best can be adapted and you get to keep up with that. So it's a great opportunity for our ECTs to reflect. They still have an entitlement to continue to network with their peers throughout those 2 years. And that's something that, again, if you did the old school NQT, you probably still have colleagues and networks that you got to know at that time. So one thing that I think we can really do is to consider how we can do these things in schools to make the most of the opportunities that are there from the ECF. We need to kind of wrangle them to make them work for us in our schools, and each of your trusts, your schools, your groups of schools, or your trainees, or whoever it is that you work with, because I know we've got a lot of different people here from all around the world actually, it's going to be slightly different how you do these things, but if we can do them, it can only help. So the fact that we're putting in the investment to make this 2-year induction happen, whereas previously we only had to do it for 1, is a big investment in time, in terms of money. And so we want it to achieve that purpose of developing those confident, resilient teachers who actually want to stay in teaching and hopefully in our schools. One thing we can do which will help with engagement and positivity around the ECF in general is to ensure we're really clear on the rationale and that is a shared understanding in our schools. So practically, things like ensuring we message strongly the rationale and benefits of the ECF, and I guess professional development more generally, is really important. If the ethos is such in our schools, it will be much easier to gain engagement and motivation, and sharing where that ECF came from and why it's so great to have this opportunity to revisit learning, reframe it, contextualise it, can make a big difference. The same is also true if we're talking about colleagues going on to do MPQs, the same evidence framed differently. Some of you might have experienced a really difficult start to the ECF. So I think something I've reflected on, which might be useful for you, is the fact that that negative kind of experience, or that difficult experience, I suppose, not negative, making sure that that didn't influence the way that I spoke about it was quite was something that I needed to think about. So considering working with your leadership teams, however that structure works for you, to clarify the purpose of that spiral curriculum of the core content framework and how actually it's just very similar to school curriculum. Also with mentors and ECTs, making it explicit that the fact that the role of a mentor and ECT to take that learning and apply it to the context takes time and development of expertise, but also that that is part of their discussions and the things that they do. Reflecting with them that this is something ECTs will have learnt during ITE, during their initial teacher education, but that as adults, we still learn the same way that children do. We need to build on things, stuff on purpose, because we now have more skills and knowledge to apply it, just like the children in school when we're teaching them. We wouldn't teach them about, science example, the periodic table, and then immediately expect them to be able to move on without applying it to some complex formulae, for example, without first revisiting it and unpicking it and talking about it again. The second thing, which is very similar and sort of interlinked, is raising the profile of the ECF. And it's something that will really help the ECTs and mentors and induction leads, as importantly, to feel supported and confident throughout the programme. If people are asking you about it, checking in, celebrating what's happening, it's going to generate that buzz as well. It also creates a really nice collegiate and supportive atmosphere with that shared understanding. And because ECF happens in most schools, making it a big deal and sharing what's happening in things like briefings and bulletins alongside any other professional development that's happening will let people know what it is and what's going on, and that people might be a little bit stressed at this point, or they might be really looking forward to getting their termly review done at Christmas or whatever it might be. So letting people know what the programme is, but also when reviews are happening, when meetings are happening, and inviting them to be part of it. Considering how your ECTs could support others in learning about really up-to-date evidence, because they probably have some of the most up-to-date knowledge, and then vice versa, getting colleagues to support your ECTs in training sessions and things like that can really, really help, giving opportunities to observe and things like that, sharing that good practice. That also has the added benefit, if you are an induction lead or you're teaching and learning leads, to be able to share the load a little bit. So you're using the experts that you already have to be able to help with supporting your early careers teachers. And I think the biggest thing on raising the profile is celebrating ECTs and mentors publicly. It's a really difficult time. And, you know, I certainly remember being at breaking point when I was a new teacher to a new school, and they work their socks off, mentors as much as ECTs. So any opportunity that you can get to thank them and praise them, I think is really great. So that's kind of about the profile, but practical actions and things that might be helpful. We know it's really unrealistic to be able to free up every mentor as much as we would all ideally like. I've already mentioned, you'll be more than aware that often they have multiple roles or responsibilities, and we'd love to give them all the resource in the world so that they had all the time that they would possibly need. But what can we practically do in schools where that's not a reality? So the first one, you're going to look at these and go, yeah, obviously, but I've certainly got to a point and gone, I wish I'd done that earlier. So thinking about it now is quite good, ready for next year. So timetabling mentors and ECTs, now that hopefully you've got staffing models are sort of firmed up, so that they can meet in school time, and so the mentor has time to observe the ECT, and ideally vice versa, if you can even manage that too, is hugely stressful, but is totally worth it. Perhaps even timetabling on the ECT's timetable, so that when they look at it on Sims or Bromcom or whatever platform you use, where they should do their study. So actually you have this 10% timetable relief. 1 hour of that is going to be with your mentor. And then you have this time here, that's for your study. And even if they don't use it for that, it's very clear that there is time there put aside to help them manage and kind of look at how they can use their time and get really well organised. Things like putting observation time when they should pop out and go and see what's happening around the school can be really helpful too. It's not easy, but if you can prioritise it, it can be really worthwhile, as I say. Obviously, this is really tricky and much more tricky in small contexts. Those of you who might work with or in small primary schools where you're geographically remote is really, really difficult. So thinking about how that can work using, obviously, technology, so videos and recording lessons and things like that, so that they can then meet and watch and observe lessons together can be really helpful. And thinking about, is it the geography that's most important and the time it takes to travel, or is it more important that they're a subject or phase match? That sort of relationship thing can be possibly the most important part. And obviously it's not the same as having a mentor in the same school as you, but knowing that person is there can be really, really helpful. So getting the match right, which kind of leads me straight into mentors in general. Supporting mentors by ensuring that their mentor time is protected above all else is so important. And letting them know that it's okay to say no to other things in order to do their mentoring. Certainly some research I've been doing myself. A lot of the early careers teachers have said, but sometimes it feels like I'm not the priority. And sometimes we'll go through a number of weeks where we don't meet because the mentor gets pulled away to do something else. Avoiding that is obviously a really important thing if we've got 90% of ECTs on that DFE evaluation saying how valuable they are. Giving them that time to have that impact and praising them for it, it can only help. Also being realistic with mentors about what they can expect from whatever programme it is that you use in your school, but also what they can gain from it, especially if they've not mentored before or they've not been a coach before. Mentors who volunteer because they're motivated to mentor are much more likely to have a positive experience. So ensuring they know what to expect and allowing them to volunteer is the ideal situation. Obviously, at the point in the year that we're at, you might have to ask people, but making sure it's a realistic ask is really helpful. And that relationship between them might seem like it's implicit in their roles, but it isn't always. So doing some work on contracting between them can really help get that open, productive relationship that's helpful. And again, the smaller the context, the more difficult this is, but avoiding line managers as mentors is very, very helpful. There's a couple of pieces of research from Clutterbuck and Hobson, if anyone fancies some reading, which says basically that can potentially diminish any positive effects. However, sometimes they're the best person to do it, and sometimes it works amazingly. So though the match made in heaven might not exist or might not be possible, we can get very close. And the really good news is if a mentor will engage with good quality training for mentoring, even with any of those limitations, they're still likely to have a good impact. So mentors are key. When I say prepare for admin, we know that registration has been and can be very tricky. But what I would say is prepare now for what schools need to be ready for the DFE registration in July. So TRNs, dates of birth, full names, contact details, ideally their school email address, and all of that for their mentors and DCTs. If you can have that ready now, it will help immensely, because I've certainly been in the position where I've had to go back and I probably shouldn't say it, but to an ECT's application form to find their TRN number in order to do the DFE registration, because I suddenly realised that I just hadn't got theirs. And if you're an induction lead or you work with induction leads, scheduling some time now to book meetings for termly reviews throughout the year so that you have that time already in your cover manager list or whatever kind of process you use can be really, really helpful. So first of all, registering with an appropriate body before September, so that job's just off the list and you've put in the purchase orders and all of that sort of thing would be great. But also thinking about, well, I'm going to have to do termly reviews at Christmas, Easter and summer. So maybe a couple of weeks before that, I want to schedule those meetings so I can start doing it. Be really, really helpful things to do. It then means that everybody knows there's going to be a bit of a busy time in terms of those ECTs, the mentors and the induction lead. Which brings me on a bit more to cover, I suppose, reducing the cover burden. And what I mean by that is probably at the start of September, you'll know the dates for conferences. Some of you will know some of these already if you're delivering them. Thinking about what CPD is happening, when are the seminars, when are the conferences, and how many people need to be out at those times. So getting those booked in now and put in the calendar so that those days are like red days, we used to call them, when no one else can have cover, can be really helpful. Also, if you've got ECTs or mentors joining your schools, they don't know how to do leaves of absences and things like that yet. So if you can do it for them before they even begin, can relieve a little bit of pressure and stress from them too. And then last but not least, well-being, definitely not least. Ensuring that mentors and induction leads schedule some time and have some training on how to address wellbeing concerns and give space for that discussion during mentor meetings, or if you run professional themes meetings or early careers teacher meetings or whatever it might be in your setting, thinking about how to address any wellbeing concerns is really helpful. Something else that has helped with well-being, and again from some sort of smaller scale surveys, is having a buddy, and I'm sure you can come up with a much better name for it than that, but having a buddy or a teacher who is outside of the area that the ECT is based in can be a really useful thing to do, because it gives the ECT someone they can form a relationship with outside of their immediate colleagues. So especially if they're in a phase where there's maybe only one or two teachers, a subject area that's really small, so perhaps one of like the arts, for example, where they're likely to be part of a small team, having someone else that they can go to the pub with, or someone else that they can build a relationship with, or ask questions about things completely unrelated to their curriculum, can be really helpful. And actually in larger schools, sometimes helpful because you're in different geographical spaces, often in different departments at secondary, and their paths don't cross that naturally. So it can help to build that network. And again, if you want to have a look at any of the slides, there's lots of references for these things. But one of the things that ECTs did value really highly was the opportunity to network face to face, not online, with people, and start to build relationships. And those ECTs that those of you might have worked with over lockdown struggled most with this because that just didn't exist. So those are some kind of practicalities that may or may not be useful. You'll probably have thought of lots of them already, but I'd be really happy to talk to you if it's helpful from my kind of experience across a range of schools. But we're hoping at the National Institute that our programme can include responses to quite a lot of this feedback and can also help schools with the ECF. We launched from September with our first cohort of ECT Year 1s. And what I'm going to just do now is talk to you a little bit about our programme and why it's slightly different and how it's responding to some of those issues. Some of you I know are already on board with National Institute, having seen some of the comments. If you already know this and you want to go, again, I won't be offended, to completely feel free. But basically, what we've tried to do, as I say, is to respond to some of the concerns and some of the challenges so that we can turn those into those opportunities I was talking about. So we're trying to provide impact through innovating on those things. So in short, what we mean is sometimes there's a benefit to coming into existence a bit later than the other providers. We can see huge benefits in coming afterwards because whilst we're new, we have that expertise on the programme. And we have experience of delivering ECF because lots of people who work for the National Institute and lots of the associate colleges and multi-academy trusts we work with have done it since the pilot's first inception. We know it's an incredible feat, a brilliant initiative to support new teachers by giving them a world-class induction programme, but it's really hard to get it right. And large-scale implementation is never going to be without those teething problems. So while going first means you've got an opportunity to engage with schools really early, going second for us has meant we've had the chance to observe and listen and learn from what's gone before to ultimately improve impact and engagement. We're really keen to respect the feelings and experiences of ECTs, mentors and schools, And so therefore try to innovate and be agile to those without ever undoing what great frameworks are that already exist. That core content to us is, is everything. So how do we do it? So there's lots of evidence about workload. And in an ideal world, we would agree probably that new teachers and mentors should be given a huge amount of time to enhance their professional development. We don't live in that world though. So our programme's been iterated and tested to ensure it provides more impact for busy teachers in less time. We're using an innovative approach to learning. So we've streamlined our content to make it digestible and easy to access. We use short, pithy summaries for mentors to act as gateways to more advanced content. We're trying to give the ECT and the mentor a scaffold to support their learning so they can access what they need to know and when they need to know it. We're respecting their time and expertise. We've heard really often, and we've just talked about it now, that teachers' expertise sometimes isn't respected, or it feels to them that it's not respected on the ECF. With mentors feeling really constrained by the framework, or ECTs being frustrated by repetitive content from ITE. For ECTs, we've designed that spiral curriculum to build specifically on what's gone before, revisit those key concepts through a new lens. And for mentors, we believe we're the only provider offering an innovative model for subject-specific and phase-specific training in their year 2. Alongside additional freedom to contextualise content and guidance on that, we believe the mentors will feel their time and expertise is being respected. We'll do some diagnosis at the start of the mentor's journey so that we can make sure their initial training with us is at the right level. And we provide exemplification at the moment for early years, primary, secondary and special settings. And we hope to have exemplification for subject specific and phase specific later on. And we all know that even if the programme content is fantastic, systems and processes can let us down. And we can't get rid of all the admin associated with ECF. We have to go through DFE registration and use an appropriate body. They're really important things. But we have designed innovative, lean, clean systems that will make the programme run smoothly when it begins. You'll hear we've joined up with our new learning management system, which is backed by Professor Rob Coe. I can't speak anymore. I've talked for too long. Apologies. And alongside that, we will have hassle-free onboarding with our Flying Start materials, allowing ECTs and mentors first thing in September to access materials, even if those logins haven't come through yet or the registration has taken some time. And we've done all of this for our MPQs for over 1,000 participants already. Our IT support are used to working in schools, supporting hundreds of teachers at once, so they provide a personalised service without any corporate automation or ticketing systems. And they can do that at scale, as I say. They've already done it with our MPQ cohort back in February with really minimal fuss and super fast response times. So our programme, you'll be unsurprised to hear if you've just been listening there, is centralised around the mentor-ECT relationship. We know from all of those evaluations and the evidence that's come recently that that's what ECTs and mentors value the highest and where they feel there needed to be more time dedicated. So our programme keeps that at its heart in many ways. We know mentors are one of our best resources, so we invest time in their training, try and respond to their training needs and ensure the programme is easy for them to manage. Everything else that happens in the programme is underpinned by the mentoring sessions. And I talked earlier about some of the positives, but mentoring can lead to a range of positive outcomes for mentees, including improved teaching practice, self-efficacy, enhanced teacher-student interactions, and improved classroom environment and resources. That's from a really recent study in 2022 with Maxwell and Stevenson. So our programme is accompanied also, I talked about wellbeing, by a wellbeing platform. Wellbeing is also checked during each live session, and we'll ask our ECTs to respond on quick questions about their wellbeing so that we can notice when there are things that maybe we can support with and that the school can support with. We have short in-person local networking sessions, which are possible to attend outside of school time for ECTs. They happen more regularly, but with less impact on workload and cover, ensuring that those networking opportunities they really value are continued. There's opportunity within those sessions to practice, do some deliberate practice about what they've learned with expert facilitators, while still reducing a bit of pressure on that time and workload. And our self-directed study is flexible. It focuses a bit more on application and action, so that we ask ECTs to do something with their reading in context and then reflect with their mentor, rather than pure study, which is difficult to apply. This is separated intentionally into weekly chunks to make it a bit easier for both mentors and ECTs to manage. And we've done all of this because we've listened to that feedback and we've tried to develop a programme which responds to those needs of ECTs and of schools. So we're also really excited that we are going to have some expert national webinars, which will be open for our ECTs on our programme, as well as their mentors and their induction leads. And we know that one and done professional development isn't enough. We know there's evidence to say so, but we also think there's a place for high profile speakers to share knowledge, thoughts and experiences. And we want it to provide that inspiration and spark conversations and provoke thought. Our ECTs or our schools might not necessarily agree 100% with everything that's said, or that they can apply it exactly that way in their context, but that in itself is a really important conversation to have. So we've convened a group of experts in their fields that many schools wouldn't be able to access in terms of the cost. And we're offering all ECTs and mentors, as I say, a chance to hear them speak. You will recognise these names, no doubt. We're really pleased and proud to kind of offer these as an addition to the programme. So that sort of brings me towards the end of what I was going to say, and I'm sure you'll be really glad to hear that I'm going to stop talking now. It's going to potentially be a little bit difficult to manage because there's quite a lot of people on the call. But if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask, feel free to type those into the chat as we come towards the end of the session.